You're listening to Trek FM.
Hello and welcome to From There to Here, Trek FM's daily rewatch of Star Trek, in which we look at all 729 episodes from beginning to end. I'm Mike, and today I'm joined by Lee from the Nerd Party. How's it going, Lee?
Yeah, very good. It's the end of the week already.
Yes, it is, and we're going to be talking about two episodes today, one from Voyager and one from DS9, Jetrel and Family Business. So let's get started with the Voyager episode, Jetrel. Now this is the one where an alien is beamed onto the ship. The guy who does those voices for the car commercials.
Dennis Haysbert?
No. He doesn't do car commercials. He does insurance, right?
Ah, yes. Yeah. I think that's the one.
Yeah. Anyway. So he comes aboard, and it turns out that he is the guy who created some weapon which wiped out Neelix's people, right? Something along those lines.
Some like gas cloud.
Right. And he's like, hey, Neelix, we need to do some testing because you might have this radiation thing from this thing, and I want to try to save your life. And Neelix is like, I don't want anything to do with this guy because he's essentially a mass murderer, and the reason why my family is dead, and you know what, he can just go to hell. And then it goes from there. So yeah, what did you think about Jetrel?
Yeah, I like it, actually. I think the parallels between Jetrel and Einstein and the nuclear bomb make it quite a fascinating episode. That I think the arguments Neelix makes and the arguments Jetrel makes for his motivations to do it, that science sometimes is about one thing leading to another, and that you may not want it to do a certain thing, but your work can lead to, disaster and doom in a way for someone. I think that's really fascinating. That it's just, you can tell that's really what they're kind of trying to tie it into, is the Americans dropping the nuclear bomb and Jetrel is Einstein. So I think that really colours the episode in a little bit for me, and it's nice to see Neelix not being a pest as well. That up until this point that he's either been really jealous or just pestering everyone, and to see him given some weight and some actual material to work with was really good, because Ethan Phillips is a great actor, and it kind of illustrates a bit for me that while Neelix isn't universally popular at all, that his behavior, I always kind of try and link it back into this episode, that this is a person that suffered one of the most probably horrific experiences imaginable, to lose his family, to lose it in such a horrible way. And that, of course, that perhaps all this, humor and attempts to please, while irritating perhaps to the viewer, all kind of ties into trying to overcompensate, perhaps being in a sense of denial, and, that's his safe space in a way.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's a lot of interesting, stuff that they do with Neelix in this episode, because up until now he really has been sort of just like the comic relief in a lot of ways, And it's interesting how effective it is, really. And you're right that Ethan Phillips is a really good actor and everything, and it almost, I think, carries more weight when you see this story told with him than when you see it told with like other people, because it's like you see the character getting serious, and you're like, wait, what? Why? Because he's usually the guy who's making me laugh. And, when he is getting this serious, then you kind of like think to yourself, oh, it must be really, really serious, because normally he's, a happy-go-lucky guy, So I think that it's interesting that they were able to use the character in this way. And, I think the character of Jetrel is interesting too. I think that the parallels that they were trying to to draw were with Oppenheimer, the guy who created the bomb and all that stuff. And I think there's actually some lines of dialogue in this episode which very clearly are paralleled to famous quotes that he had made over the years. And it's kind of an interesting character, someone who really he did something which he absolutely regrets. I mean, it's like the biggest regret of his life, of course, and he's desperately trying to make it right, and he can't, in a lot of ways. And it's a good episode for sure. It's very Star Trek-y. It's definitely speaking to something which is an interesting moral dilemma, and it has a lot of interesting facets to it, from both sides, and yeah, it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, it's not just, as you say, black and white, that you've got Jetrel in that. It reminded me, it took me back to when I was like a kid, that when we were in debating class in high school, I took the stance, it wasn't my personal stance, but I took the stance for a debate that, yeah, it was perfectly acceptable to drop the nuclear bomb on Hiroshima. And I remembered, and then when I first saw this episode, I was drawn parallels with that, going, oh, that was kind of some of the arguments that I was making just, in debating class. And it was kind of on a personal level, the episode kind of took me back in a way to my youth as well.
Yeah. It's interesting for sure. Yeah. And it's one of those things where, instead of presenting a clear cut, right and wrong thing, it makes you think about it, and I think in a lot of ways that's, much more effective than giving you a clear answer, because it's not force feeding you. And by presenting, both sides of the argument, you don't feel like you're not getting some of the information or whatever, So yeah, definitely a very good episode. So should we move on to the Deep Space Nine episode for today?
Yep.
Family Business. Now this is the episode where Quark finds out that his mother has been making money, and that's illegal in the Ferengi society. So now he needs to go to Ferenginar, I guess, right? The Ferengi homeworld, and basically get her to stop and pay everyone back or whatever. And if he doesn't, then it could ruin him financially, which of course would ruin him personally as a Ferengi. So yeah, what did you think about Family Business?
Well, I'll try and be positive first. The introduction of Jeffrey Combs again in Star Trek as Liquidator Brunt is always a pleasure. That whatever role he's playing, I love when Jeffrey Combs comes to Star Trek. It's always a treat. And I think Liquidator Brunt's quite a funny character. I always find his interactions with Quark are always a bit of a treat. It's good to finally meet Cassidy Yates.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure about her hairband thing that she's got going on in the back there, but, that wouldn't be Star Trek without having a female character wearing something ridiculous in her hair.
Yep.
So that was quite good to see Sisko get, smiling is always a treat. So that was fine. Just the rest of the episode is just not the greatest. That I was saying in the previous episode that it's good to see Bashir starting to become like this fully fledged human being character. But then in this episode he's back to being kind of a bit, a bit annoying a little bit with, with the dartboard and everything like that. That just, you think, oh, come on. It's, it's a fine, funny beat, but you just think that, a bit better than that. And then the whole thing with the Ferenginar stuff is just awful. I mean, there's some Ferengi episodes that are some cracking ones, but this one is one of the poorer ones that I just didn't enjoy this plot line whatsoever. I didn't care. Some of the quirks about Ferengi society were quite funny when you see them constantly having to tip each other and things like that are kind of funny, but the whole plot line is really just garbage.
Yeah, when I was at this convention, Ira Stephen Bear was talking about how, with the Ferengi, he was constantly trying to fit, a square peg into a round hole, and it never really fit. and one of the reasons was because they weren't really very good at doing humor, but that he loved the Ferengi because he really saw them as the humans of the 24th century. They were flawed and all that stuff, and I don't know. I definitely don't dislike this episode as much as you do. I think there's a lot of cool stuff in it. I mean, a lot of firsts again, like you were saying, first Cassidy, first Brunt, and first Moogie. And, I think that it's kind of a humorous, I don't know, farce, for sure. Obviously they're trying to deal with, the issue of feminism and that sort of thing. And I think that it's, for the most part, effective. I don't know. I mean, sometimes it goes a little too far, and I'm not exactly sure that they made their point, as well as they could have. But I think that there's enough stuff in there, which serves as sort of like world building for the Ferengi, which makes it worth it. I don't know. Like you said, the Ferengi episodes sometimes not exactly the best in the world. I think they are rather hit or miss. But this one, I think, is decent. I mean, certainly it's not an episode where I'm like, oh yeah, let's turn on Family Business. Yeah, let's go. But I think that it's fine. I think that it offers some interesting character development for Quark. And for the Ferengi on the whole, for Rom as well, and I don't hate this episode by any means, and I really do like the B plot with Cassidy, and the fact that they bond over baseball. That's pretty great. So I'm sure you're a big baseball fan.
Yeah, big fan of the White Sox of Chicago.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All right. But I don't know. I definitely don't dislike this episode as much as you do. Yeah.
No, it's like, as I say, I think the interactions in the Ferengi episodes are often always excellent. It's just the plots really aren't. They're just not very good sometimes. That it's not like you're watching The Big Short where you're watching this like financial investigation or something like that. It's just a kind of, it's not the most exciting of plotline that they could be given. That I enjoyed the Quark, the Rom, the Nog, everyone like working together and involved in episodes. It's just the plots that they hang them on are just not the best.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up our episodes for today. Thanks for joining me, Lee. Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Lee_Nostromo. You can find me on my Star Trek account, Star Trek VHS, sharing VHS and Laserdisc covers on Twitter as well. And you can find me on my own podcast, The Senate Floor, where we talk about everything from Star Trek to beyond, really. So yeah, come check us out there.
All right, and you can find me right here on Trek FM doing Stage 9 with John Mills, where we talk about the people who make Star Trek. And you can also find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K. All right, well, thanks for joining me for this block, Lee.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, tomorrow I will be back with Daniel from Earl Grey to talk about 2 more episodes of Star Trek, Learning Curve and Shakaar.